Hey guys, welcome to Make You Remarkable, a brand new podcast brought to you by Oconee State Bank. I'm your host, JT Tomlin, and on this podcast, we're going to be talking all things leadership, entrepreneurship, and personal development. Our goal is to ignite purpose and inspire passion in our listeners by asking them the question, how will you make you remarkable? We'll be interviewing local legends, business owners, and leaders within our communities and asking them about their road to success. Like, what kind of steps did they take to get where they are now? What does it mean to be a leader? And how can I lead my team? As well as what kind of mark they've made and what kind of mark they hope to leave in the future. This is going to be an amazing podcast, and we cannot wait for you to listen to it. So make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and follow us on social media at Oconee State Bank for more information. And today I'm joined with Matt Stevens, the Senior Director of Community Impact at Creature Comforts. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Good. Thanks for coming. All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I have a unique relationship to the city of Athens. I'm a boomerang. I've moved away 4 times. I've come back 4 times. I've spent chapters of my life here as a young child, as an undergrad, as a grad student, as a whatever I am today. But you know, very long story short, my parents moved here right when I was born. So I was here right up until elementary school. Even when we relocated Gwinnett County, we were just 50 minutes down the road, 78. And both my mom's parents at the time, before they passed away, were here in Athens. And then my dad and his dad both played football here. So we were in town, 2-3 times a month my entire growing up years to see grandparents or to do a UGA thing or whatever. So I was never super away while I was away. But anyway, undergrad here, moved abroad for grad school and came back again and moved away again and came back again. So I just have finally rooted. It took 4 times. 2009 is when I came here and said, okay, this is my place.
I'll finally call Athens home.
Yes, putting down roots. I think I'm done wandering, and just kind of started to dig in at that point.
So I'm assuming you're a graduate of UGA?
A couple times, yes.
Nice. Couple times. What does that mean?
Yeah, so again, very wandering was my 20s for sure. So my initial, career trajectory was going to be into ideally a faculty position at a university. So that is to say, I did my undergrad degree in performance theory and film studies, did a grad degree in film studies and narrative theory, came back to UGA. That was, I guess, the 3rd time to start a PhD that I never finished in European, cinema. And once you go that far in a direction that you're a couple years into a doctorate and you hop off the bus, you really just start walking is the analogy I've always used. So after that, again, I bounced around. I was in Charleston for a bit. I was in Madison, Wisconsin for a bit, and really just trying to figure out, okay, if not a faculty position at a university teaching film studies, which had been the plan for most of my life, what now? So
boomeranged, went to UGA, then kept boomeranging, and now you're here.
Yes. And so I did eventually get a master's degree in public administration, nonprofit leadership, which is really the degree I'm leveraging today.
Awesome.
So yes, I guess technically a double dog, but there's a few lost years in a doctoral program as well.
You look at everything, I guess I am, but there's a little bit different.
Yes. And I will say, every brand is constantly in the process of telling its story. So we'll say, some of that narrative theory, some of that film studies, storytelling aspect definitely makes it into my world today. But
oh, for sure.
It was, it felt like a hard right, professionally speaking, when I walked away from a PhD.
Yeah. But I'm positive that all of those parts of your story, are making an impact because, you kind of have to use them. Hardwired into you. You're like, oh, I know this part of it now. So now I tell stories from this perspective.
Absolutely. And, this is just free advice to anyone listening. There is a great benefit of trying out that career that you may have always wondered about and crossing it off the list, which I did that many times. There's tremendous value in that.
I wanted to do that, but now that I've seen that world, I'm like, I don't know.
Precisely.
So what brought you to Creature Comforts? How did you go from UGA and wanting to go into being working at a university to Creature Comforts?
Right. We're going to start to see some kind of overlap in what y'all do and what we do. So the conclusion that I came to after, again, all those moves was I wanted to be in a university town. And the reason for that is I came to appreciate what a strategic location a college town is, and that, arguably people are moving to town by the tens of thousands, arguably during one of those most, top 10 or top 2 most impressionable seasons of life, where they're coming to town and they're asking like the big questions, right? Like, who am I now that I don't have my parents looking over my shoulder? Who am I when nobody's watching? And, what am I good at? And what's the story I want to tell? So if you are rooted, if you are a resident of a college town, you have this opportunity, whatever you're doing, to intersect with this population that's just so hungry for, vision and purpose and identity. And then, of course, they don't typically stay there. They move to Atlanta or New York or Paris or wherever they go. And so you have this chance to like impress something upon these folks. So that is all to say. I was like, I want to be in a college town. I just love the energy and the opportunity there. And of course, I also realized that you don't have to be a faculty member at a university to work for a university. And so ultimately that position that brought me back to town the fourth and I hope final time was UGA at the time. And for about 20, 25 years, they have recently sold it or whatever they did. But they had a research station down in Costa Rica. And so that wing of UGA was known as UGA Costa Rica. And so I helped run the Athens office of that international research station. And that's really where the journey, I think, to today began, which is if I don't, again, I'm a double dog and my dad and grandfather played football here. So I've been like really dialed into UGA since I was a zygote. So that is to say, I really appreciated the history of what UGA is, which was, again, apparently the first public institution of higher education. The first, documentation that said higher ed should be a good an opportunity for the public, not just the private, not just essentially the wealthy.
Yeah.
So what you find, even in like that charter, written in 1785, I mean, the history of UGA is essentially this concept that the state of Georgia should be better off, at least in theory, because of the University of the state of Georgia. Mm-hmm. And so that public service and outreach arm and missional element of UGA that was there back in the 18th century is still, on the books today. And so that is all to say, at UGA Costa Rica, I had a fantastic leader. His name is Dr. Quentin Newcomer. He was really not my first boss, but like my first like professional mentor who was really actively developing me as a person, but also as, hopefully a leader of some sort. And he was the one who said, all right, Matt, when I came to that position, he'd been there, a decade plus. And this is such a great thing. He said, Matt, I'm jaded. I've been looking at this project for a decade now. I need fresh eyes to look at it anew and, kind of walk the perimeter of everything that is UGA Costa Rica. And if you see something that is an opportunity, like raise your hand.
Yeah, say something.
Which is a wonderful thing for a leader to give you permission to do, especially as a new hire. And so after about a year of kind of kicking around what my job was, I realized, gosh, when you looked at what UGA Costa Rica was, which was essentially, UGA parachuted into this international context, I realized we had a plan for essentially excellence in teaching, which is part of the UGA mission. Obviously, we were doing tons of study abroad. We had a plan for excellence in research because we were primarily this research station. We did not have a plan for that public service and outreach element of the UGA mission. And so I was really going back to Quentin saying, what would it look like for us to take that seriously, this call to serve in this international setting? Because, good grief, we were sending thousands of students down there every year and faculty and millions of dollars of infrastructural support. Like, what would it look like for us to add strategic value to our region, which was that little sliver of my job? Because ultimately he said, go for it. I don't have time. I don't have margin for that, but maybe you do. So, but that was the little sliver of my job performance plan that really was like, man, if I had a job that was just doing that sliver, that would be a pretty
You got that little taste and you're like, ooh, I like this job.
Yes. So that is what domino-like effect. That's why I did another master's degree in nonprofit leadership management. That's, by the time I finished that degree, I'd been at UGA Costa Rica for about 6-7 years at that point, and I was ready to pivot out of that into the next thing. And so to answer your question, finally, short question, long answer. Creature Comforts was like opening its doors right around the same time.
It's like right when you were leaving, you were like, looking for somewhere new and Creature Comforts.
Yes. And there's 3 founders. One of the founders and still the CEO today, totally random. He and I played soccer together from like the ages of 8 until 18. So
Really?
he was like soccer buddy from back in the Atlanta area. And he'd been up in Connecticut for like 12 years or something at the time. And so, literally Facebook post, hey, I'm moving, my family to Athens, Georgia. And it was like, Chris, what are you coming to town for? And, so right when he kind of landed, Chris Herron is his name, CEO of Creature Comforts. When he, got settled in Athens and I grabbed lunch with him, I said, tell me about this craft brewery, like why this place? And he was doing extremely well at literally the largest spirits distributor in the world. He had a pathway to excellence. And so why roll the dice on craft beer in Georgia at the time?
Yeah.
And so when I heard his vision, when I heard the why of Creature Comforts, it was like, my goodness, businesses can similar to everything I just said about UGA Costa Rica, a business can say, okay, what have we to mobilize? How are we uniquely positioned in terms of financial resources or time or expertise or location or whatever? How do we add value, measurable value to our community? And I got to say, gosh, Chris, that's what I've been doing really for a few years now. And I would love to speak into that if ever there's opportunity. And so very long story short.
No, yeah. So what did he tell you? Like, what was that first thing that you were saying? You like the why of Creature Comforts. What is that?
Yeah. If you were to talk to him or really our other 2 founders, why Creature? They would essentially say, they would have acknowledged 3 things at the time. This is in April 2014 was when we opened our door. So almost exactly 9 years ago. They would have said, okay, thing one, generally speaking, we believe that businesses can be a force for good. They aren't always, but they can be. They can be part of the solution to their community priorities.
Yeah.
So, general belief, more specific belief, we think Athens, Georgia should be better off because of the businesses that are choosing to root there, because there's ties to Athens. In particular, the other 2 founders had done their degrees here and had just a great and abiding love for Athens. Yeah. So there's like this specific desire of, okay, Athens, we have a chance to like play some role to, lift up this community that we love so much. And then they would have said, but we don't know what that looks like. They would have been very forthright. Business can be a force for good. We want this place to be better. We want to be a force for good here. And then, we have no idea what's next. But there was that organizational DNA. It was already there. Yeah. That value was already there. So that kind of led to everything that's happened since.
I think one of the cool things that, like what you just said, that the humility and like, okay, we know what we want, but we have no clue how to get it.
Right.
And we're going to go look for people to do that.
That has been the name of the game, yes.
With Creature Comforts, how do they hire like talent that's like top tier talent that's going to help further Creature Comforts?
Yes. Well, I will say, here's the part that I can brag on because I have precisely nothing to do with it. But the brand itself has grown very quickly. Yeah. I don't know how geeky you are about craft beer, but just to kind of throw some context around this. So our industry is governed by kind of the national organization called the Brewers Association, the BA, based out in Denver. And the BA is the one essentially for our industry that does the huge national conferences and does the big competitions and does the resourcing and the policy and all the things that, associations, industrial associations do. Anyway, so they're the ones with the data. And essentially what the landscape of craft beer in America looks like right now is there's about 9,300 craft breweries in the United States.
Wow.
Like 9,300. And again, bragging on something I have nothing to do with. We're the 41st largest craft brewery of those, 9,000.
Holy cow.
And as cool as that, I would say, is we actually cracked that top 50 a couple years back. And at that time, we were still just in one state.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I was like, y'all were just Athens, right? Or are there multiple other locations?
Well, we only have the locations here, but we were only distributing product to the state of Georgia at the time.
And y'all were number 4, did you say 41?
41 now. I think we officially hit number 49 or 48 or something when we broached that top cluster. So the fact that there's that much demand and that much success in just one state, you didn't even have to cross the border to hit numbers like that. Again, that's just mind blowing. So that is to say, there's a lot of visibility. There's a lot of love of the product. And so therefore there is a lot of opportunity to be seen. And we always try to talk about, there's that delicate balance that we're always trying to play of, essentially the value of being seen doing good, but not doing good just to be seen.
Yeah.
That's subtle distinction. But we're trying to harness, like, what does it look like for us to surface some of our story, but to do it in the right way?
What's that healthy balance?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, the fact that we have visibility enables us to be a little bit of a megaphone and hopefully a helpful co-laborer and peer to other businesses who are trying to figure out what is highest and best use of our generosity or whatever. But also, it's a healthy company, so that means, especially if you do fundraising like we do, which is like percentage of revenue, just becomes the community impact budget. As the business grows, so does the resourcing.
Yeah, and you're able to do more, and then those questions really become more and more prevalent, where it's like, all right, we have the ability to do much, much, much more, but how do we make sure that it's actually doing good and it's not just us trying to look like we're doing good kind of thing?
Exactly. I mean, what you will find in this space, whatever you want to call it, corporate social responsibility, CSR, or corporate citizenship, which is kind of like, I guess, my field. What you will find in the canon, kind of the best practices of how to do good better, is essentially never, if you will, and no worries if anybody listening has done some version of this, and nothing but love. But don't walk into a community saying, here's our solution.
Yeah.
A little bit, ask questions first. Because there's a lot of things, anybody who's trying to be generous, whether they're an individual or they're an organization, there's a lot of things that we all could do because there's needs everywhere, right? There's probably a shorter list of opportunities we should lean into. Yeah. And to take that route, you need to be looking at data. You need stakeholders all around. You need local leadership speaking in, because for the most part, communities know what their priorities are. And so we're just asking that question, like, what do y'all think we should do? What's the best thing we could do?
You don't walk into someone's house and tell them how to fix it. You're just like, you go in and you're like, all right, okay, if I see something that needs to get fixed, I'm going to let it, I might say something later.
Yes.
But this is a time I've just been welcomed into someone's home.
That is such a great analogy.
Now.
Yes. That's exactly it. And so that's effectively who we've tried to be here, is just walking in saying, we want to help. We have assets at our disposal. I mean, as a craft brewery, we like to say we have time, we have space because we have kind of a cool strategic location.
Yeah.
We have beer that we can give away, and we have money. So kind of look down into your hands, what do we have? And then look around and say, okay, what should we do? And then hopefully, again, stakeholders will take you there.
I think even because y'all have grown really fast. Obviously it's been a steady climb, but then recently, especially and I guess we're gonna talk about this soon, but with the Marvel movie and moving up to oh my gosh, where is it? I keep thinking
San
Angeles.
San Antonio. That is west of us. Yeah. You're moving in the right direction.
Los Angeles. You're moving out to Los Angeles. Those are big moves, and so it's looking bigger and bigger and bigger. But all of a sudden you have those funds, and you're like, okay, what can I do? How can I help?
Right.
So how do y'all decide what to do within your community? How do you decide how to help them?
Yes. I would say, thing one is at least 28 million other people who read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We kind of wrestle. So there's, one of the ideas is essentially you have to know what your highest priorities are. And then you have to, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, and then you have to have the courage, smilingly, unapologetically, he says, to say no to basically everything else. And the way you do that, the way you give yourself permission to say no to a lot of opportunities is, to quote him, you have to have that bigger yes burning inside of you. Because again, what you will find in the literature is the typical, corporate philanthropic approach is we have resources that we want to mobilize. And because there may not be strategy there, or there may not be, let's be honest, it's pretty amazingly unique that Creature Comforts has a community impact department with 4 people doing this full time, and we have nothing to do with brewing or selling beer. So the fact that we have a team and have been resourced in this way is pretty, again, remarkable, to use the word. So we don't take that for granted. But that is all to say, if you don't have a strategy for your generosity, you're probably just going to be asked for a lot of opportunities, and that's, again, a wonderful neutral idea. But you're just going to probably start writing checks here and there, and you're probably just going to be scattering resources widely. but maybe not taking big whacks at, pressing generational cyclical priorities.
Yeah.
So
it's really talking about what you're saying, where you have all those resources, and because you're so overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, what do I do with this?
Right.
You don't really think, okay, how can I actually help? You're just like, all right, take it.
Right.
I don't know what to do. And I want to really make sure that I'm doing the right thing. But by doing that, you're not really thinking of how can I really make an impact?
Yes. So it's that discipline. It's that kind of fight against the gravitational pull of doing too much. Because, I know my big thumping heart wants to just say yes to every request, right? That's what we all want to do. And so to try to say, y'all are doing fantastic work, it's a no, because what we are fully invested in is this and, these kind of impact areas over here. So, and I even had a nonprofit leadership professor back in the day say, if you're doing philanthropy right, you're always going to feel a little bit like a jerk.
Yeah.
Because to select anything is to deselect everything else. And of course, every cause, every agency, every need, again, speaking for myself, my heart breaks for all of it. I want to dump out the bucket everywhere. But if we do that, again, we're going to kind of go wide and not deep. And so to start with, we were kind of bothered by that Stephen Covey idea of gosh, we need to know what that bigger yes is. And then that's going to give us permission to say no to just about everything else. But the next step we took was, okay, if we're asking the question, out of all the things we could do, what are the biggest needs in Athens-Clarke County right now? There are people who can answer that question and answer it robustly. And so what we essentially did is, years back, we assembled what we today just call an advisory council, a cross-sector consortium of local leaders who can answer that question. When we say, what are the greatest needs in Athens-Clarke County in 2023? And then sub-question, who's doing that work? Who's doing the most to meet that need so we can throw our weight behind them? There's not a lot of people who can answer that. So that's, thus the council. And so the council is a again, representative body. It's our city manager, Blaine Williams, representing local government. It's the executive directors of United Way of Northeast Georgia, the Athens Area Community Foundation. Our needs assessment database for our county is all co-located at this organization called the Athens Wellbeing Project. Mm-hmm. So we have their lead analyst who's actually pulling and analyzing all the needs assessment data for the county. They're at the table. Clarke County's 20-year plan, Envision Athens. We have that project director at the table. So we have, this group of about 8 or 9 people, and we essentially turn to them and say, here's what we have to offer in terms of, again, hourly capacity, how do we mobilize time, but also, specifically our financial resources. Yeah. And those are pretty predictable now, because now that we're doing a percentage of revenue, we can just do the math and say, here's how many dollars we think we have at our disposal. And then, we'll get more into it, I suppose, but Get Comfortable is also about the collective impact of the business community. So now we have, dozens of other local businesses that are also aligning and coordinating their generosity through this thing called Get Comfortable. So we're really saying, here's what we got to offer. What do y'all think is the impact area that we should be focusing on?
Yeah.
And so, that group helps us wrestle to the ground a consensus, and then off we go.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about Get Comfortable in just a second. But I'm curious, what was the first idea of, okay, this is the biggest need in Athens? What did y'all come to?
Yeah, so we've been open 9 years. Get Comfortable's been around for 8 of them. And I'm going to be, again, just very transparent. The early years were very, I like to say we didn't have a very big shovel. We couldn't move a lot of dirt. So it's kind of like start somewhere, start small. So, for the most part, those early years are really committed to what in the social services world are just known as relief agencies, relief support, things like food insecurity, things like, housing access, homelessness, hunger, those kind of, basic needs, if you will. Because Athens-Clarke being statistically a very high poverty county, especially for the community our size, and everything that flows downstream of that, which is access to housing, access to affordable housing, transportation, and all these basic snarled needs. We were really kind of working within those spaces, because back in the day, before we kind of saw what was possible, we were essentially just trying to fill up the bucket every year and then dump it out.
Yeah.
And then fill it up the next year and dump it out. So what we would, very practically speaking, we would raise all the money we could raise at Creature, but also all these other businesses that were starting to participate. And then we would turn to that advisory council and say, okay, we have $75,000. This year we have $160,000. Next year we had, whatever we had. And we would say, how far could that stretch? And we would do a request for proposals. We were asking agencies, what would you do with a check? Would you be expanding existing programs or services? Would you be using the seed money to introduce new initiatives? Like, help us understand. And we would essentially just look at this pile of proposals with our council and say, how far will the money stretch? And again, we just cut all the checks and dump it out and lather, rinse, repeat. It's really coming out of the pandemic years where, some of the silver linings of those truly awful years is people were almost becoming, those who were surviving, businesses in particular, they were like becoming more generous than ever, which is amazing. So we actually saw like huge spikes and huge upward trends in the generosity of this entire community during those really, really tough years, which is an amazing thing to see.
It's crazy because the finances were lower, but people were like, oh my gosh, I can give this. I can do that.
And the needs were just so obvious, right? And so yes, it was a really cool thing to see. So that is all to say, coming out of the pandemic, we turned to the council and said, okay, we're talking about a lot of money now, especially for a city our size. Maybe instead of doing the lather, rinse, repeat 1 year, one conversation at a time, are we now at the point that we should go after a more systemic, more deep-seated intervention and commit to, not for a year, but commit to it until the needle moves? And essentially, they said, yes, y'all are there now. So then the question became, all right, same question. Out of all the things we could do, what should we do? And so they led us to early literacy as an impact area. And once we had our impact area, because as amazing as our council is, now we needed local expertise that work in that space. So we put together this focus group. This is throughout 2021 now. We met with the same group. Gosh, it was 6 times, 7 times. We had multiple sessions. And this group was about 16, 17 people. It was local leadership at the Clark County School District. It was, for example, the director of data and research at the district, the one who's like looking at success rates. It was the ELA curriculum director for the district. It was some principals. It was some teachers. It was some nonprofit leaders as well in that space. And we were saying to that group, the early literacy focus group, okay, here's the resources we have. What singular metric should we be focusing on to ensure that we're winning?
We're successful, yeah.
And then 2, what specific intervention strategies should we be funding? Are they already out there? In which case we just throw a lot of resources at it? Or does somebody need to initiate a new methodology and let's help fund that? So that focus group helped us determine our metric and our timeline. And essentially what they said is the metric we should be paying attention to in this county is 3rd grade reading proficiency. Because there's a lot of reasons for that, but we'll stay high level for right now. 19% of 3rd graders in Athens Clark County schools coming into this academic year are reading a level, 19%. Wow. And so we said, okay, that's unconscionable. We're in. What's possible? And they said, if you do essentially everything we tell you to do, because they're the experts, and you fund this for at least 5 academic years, we think that essentially 20%, 19% could become 60%.
Wow.
And that would be kind of the tipping point. So we said, okay, we're in.
That works.
Yes. So then we retooled everything subsequent to that. We rewrote our RFP, our request for proposal, to say, okay, agencies, we used to cast a wider net. Now we're looking for proposals that's going to help move this needle. If you can help do that, submit your proposal. And so then we took that stack of proposals to this focus group. And we said, all right, who should we be funding? Specifically, what needs to be created? And then we just started a monthly cadence with the agencies that we're funding and with kind of an implementation committee that's going to be walking with us for the next 5 years, which is, again, a subset of that group I just told you about. So we're in a pilot year. Long story short, we are in a pilot year. We're going to see if it's working. And so what we launched back in August 22, which will conclude in terms of a pilot year, essentially right now, when this is coming out, right at the end of the school year, is we pulled all the data in terms of what's called the iReady test, which is new third graders, like what's your reading proficiency? And we're about to be doing the post tests.
Awesome.
Now, again, we've been meeting with this group all year, and we can talk about what the intervention strategy actually is, but we're seeing incredible progress. And we have a few faculty at UGA that are doing program eval, and I have 2 control schools, and we're doing all the comparative data. And what we're seeing is statistical significance in terms of the growth. But we're about to get like the second, like the post iReady test. And at that point, we're going to say, all right, is it working? If yes, what's our next step? How big do we scale? Because we're not going to go from 1 school to 14. So what's that next logical step? Or if it's not working as well as we hoped, we need to go into, subsequent year of piloting to make sure before we franchise this, if you will, we got to perfect that recipe.
So we were talking about how y'all are really trying to work on like proficiency in third graders.
Yes.
Their reading proficiency. And is that all under the Get Comfortable campaign, or is that a completely different group?
That is, yes, that is the impact area for the Get Comfortable campaign, at least until the year 2027.
Wow.
So that was the commitment that the focus group said. It's going to take at least 5 years to see these sorts of results.
To get that 19 to 60.
Correct. So yes, that's where we're focused for a long time. And back to that bigger yes burning inside. Let me unpack why is third grade so important, just briefly, because again, this was all new information to me.
No, you're good.
As we were building out the program.
Sure.
Third grade is such a pivotal point in a young mind's educational trajectory. Is the way to, I guess, summarize it, because that tends to be statistically when that individual transitions from learning to read to now reading to learn.
Wow.
And so if there's a gap there, if they're not able to read on par with their peer group, since all the subjects will now assume you can read now, including math. I mean, think about a math book. It's not just numbers, right?
Yeah.
So if you can't read on level at that age, statistically, the gap starts to grow year over year. So there's this unbelievable correlation between third grade reading proficiency, or improficiency, I guess you'd say, and high school dropout. And then there's a subsequent correlation between high school dropout and that individual having interactions with the criminal justice system or social services or what have you. So what effectively our advisory council said is, y'all now have the resourcing to go upstream.
Yeah.
And instead of, maybe this is a bit of a, colorful example, but one of the things that we heard in our focus group is, right now what you've been doing is you've been kind of pulling babies out of the water, which is a great thing to do. You're like finding emergency opportunities, and again, whether it's food or hunger or housing, and somebody needs to be doing that still.
Yeah.
But what y'all should do is try to go upstream and try to prevent those babies going into the water in the first place. That sort of idea. So again, I guess that has always stuck with me, of like the preventative side of what we're trying to accomplish is really the reason for the shift. Not only the shift in impact area, from again basic services to something like developmental, but also the shift from a single year fundraising cycle to a multi-year fundraising cycle. It was really at the advice and the prompting of our council, who said, I think y'all are ready to tackle something that's a bit more deep-rooted. So
what does it look like to really help third graders learn to read? Like what do y'all do
right
in that? Are y'all in classrooms? Are y'all setting up like tutoring centers? What does it look like?
Great question. So this is where our pilot and really kind of our major funded agency partner comes into play, Books for Keeps. If you've ever heard of Books for Keeps, they have been in this community for years now. What their bread and butter has been since their inception was book distribution, and they still do that. But it was this perfect merger of part of their strategic plan, unbeknownst to everything we were doing behind the scenes with Get Comfortable, was really looking to, for them to hold on to the book distribution piece to stop summer slide and all the things they've been doing for years. But now to be doing like high dose push-in, one-on-one literacy mentorship in the schools, in the classrooms during the day. They were already thinking that direction. And then lo and behold, here comes the RFP, the request for proposal. And they said,
we want to help.
We can help with that. So we were able to help essentially accelerate where they were hoping to get in a few years, because we were able to say, What do you need? Here's the funding. You need a person full-time focused on this. Go hire that person. Her name is Colleen Craven. So we were able to work with them. So to answer your question, there's a few different facets to this intervention that we hope will ultimately lead to increases in proficiency. But the, kind of that 20-80, the 20% that we think is going to produce 80% of the results is really identifying, again, through the district, who are those second and third graders. We're actually working in both grades now. And pause there. Part of the reason is second and third graders today are those who are, digital classrooms for the past few years.
Yeah.
So they kind of came into the school system post-COVID. Who can read through a screen?
No,
right?
No.
So they were already kind of dinged by the times. And so we've embraced both of those grades. And the question became, okay, who within that subset at our pilot school is at least 1 or 2 grade levels behind where they should be? The district kind of flagged those students. And then the opportunity became, we now need to recruit, train, and place and match literacy mentors with every single one of these students for an additional hour of reading time a week.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the work. So, what Books for Keeps really led is identifying those volunteers, doing this kind of vast training process. For the most part, these are everyday folks. In fact, I'm one of them, and I'm here to tell you I've never been a teacher, but they prepare you to augment what they're learning in the classroom. And so what it looks like practically is every week you go during the second and or third grade kind of reading block.
Yeah.
You pull those students out, and you are essentially augmenting what they're learning. You're doing phonics, you're doing sight words, you're doing a lot of love of reading in addition to just the lifting of, again, learning how to read. But this model is based on things that have happened all over the country in terms of you can't ask teachers oftentimes to do more. Yeah. They're maxed out. They're tapped out. They're doing everything they can do, and they're doing it well. There's a lot of factors that lead to a student falling behind. And so what they need is a mentor to come alongside them and actually reinforce not only the curriculum, but let's be honest, just to show these incredible young people that there are people in this community that are for them, and just giving them another voice of just a person saying, you can do this.
That care
I
about
see
their
you.
Success. Yeah.
So that's the cohort that we're measuring, is that group of second or third graders at Howard B. Stroud Elementary, which is our pilot school, who are a few steps behind. And we're about to see how much did they catch up through this intervention.
That's so cool. So I'm curious, this may just be like a selfish curiosity. What program do y'all use to teach? Do y'all use Orton Gillingham, or what are y'all using?
It was actually stitched together from a few different interventions that have been operating around the country for years. We actually partnered with UGA's Fanning Institute.
Oh, cool.
And the Mentor Georgia program to essentially tailor a methodology that they thought was going to fit the needs of Clark County.
That's awesome.
So
when I was in school, I was in a similar situation where I had to get taken out of class to learn reading to that level. I'm dyslexic. And so when in that program it sounds very similar. And so it's very interesting to hear, because it's a really big issue, because if you're not able to teach those critical skills, especially being an adult, I couldn't imagine not being able to read at least the information I need to get done.
Right.
Obviously, it's not like they couldn't read at all. I mean, some kids it is, but it's very much like if I can't functionally read, where I need, if it's a task to go in and read just a simple email, makes it's a vital skill to know. And so it's a really good thing to work on.
Definitely.
So tell me a little bit more about the Get Comfortable campaign. How did it get started? And I know this is your child, right?
I've been around it for a long time. Yes.
So tell me about it. What is the Get Comfortable campaign?
I mean, the expression itself has a few reasons why. I mean, to, I guess, kind of give you the ethos of it, we believe that discomfort, so the absence of comfort, emerges whenever any need goes unmet.
Yeah.
I mean, fill in the blank need, secure housing, food, medical access, whatever the need is. If that need goes unmet long enough, that person, and really, let's be honest, the people around them become more and more and more uncomfortable. So that was kind of the heartbeat of the phrase. But we also hoped and, prayed and, at least saw the potential of, if Creature Comforts as just one participant in our community is about to go out and do all the stuff that I just told you about, build relationships with local stakeholders, do the data dives, understand where our pressing needs and all the things. What we hoped is, if we were going to do that legwork, that others might join us, like in terms of the business community.
Yeah.
Like, as you probably know, a lot of business owners, they want to be generous and they are generous, but not everyone can say, here's the highest and best use of my generosity. So if we could reach out to them and say, we know you want to be confident that whatever dollars you're sending out the door aren't just like doing work or meeting needs, but are doing, the best work according to the community leadership. If we're going to do that legwork, perhaps people would want to join us. And so we also wanted a brand that would stand by itself.
Yeah.
So, nothing wrong with having called it the Creature Comforts Cares, foundation or whatever. Mm-hmm. We wanted it to be able to be owned and to belong to everyone. So, the mission from the get-go has been to channel the generosity of many towards the greatest local needs.
Yeah.
So I've told you all about how we identify greatest local needs, but that generosity of many piece was essentially the hunch, the belief that if we're going to try to figure out this path, that others will want to coordinate, and that's what we've seen as well.
Yeah, it's like the saying, like, it takes a village to raise a baby.
Right.
Granted, we're not talking about babies here, but we're talking about taking care of. Like, it takes a village. You can just end it there. Like, it really takes a village to keep the village running.
Right.
That sounded very cringy.
I think it sounds great, but honestly, there have been, I don't know what the number is anymore, because it's really a colleague of mine who's, has taken this program to the next level. But it's, 30, 40, 50, back in my day, it was like 60 local businesses of all types, of all sizes, doing something to steer their dollars into this thing. So, Creature just convened this consortium, but we're just one player at the table nowadays.
Well, which is crazy, because
that's designed.
You were talking about earlier, like when y'all were first starting, you had this bucket that you were like the bucket of finances, and you're like, you don't know where to put it. Like, you're just kind of putting it wherever you can, and you're kind of becoming that middleman for people and saying, hey, I know that you're like, especially some of the Athens companies, they're mom and pop shops. So they're smaller companies who want to make a difference, but they barely have the time of day to focus on making sure that they can keep up with inflation and all of these different things.
Absolutely.
Like they don't have the ability to focus on, all right, where is the biggest need? They're just like, I know I want to help, but I don't know how.
That's it.
You're really becoming that, hey, this is how you can help. And we've done all of that research for you. We know exactly what the biggest need is in Athens. And if you want to help, you can. If you don't, I totally get it. We just came out of COVID. It's crazy. Like, trying to figure out finances right now is insane, but that's it. We know we've done the work for you to figure that out.
The analogy I've used, and now kind of tiptoeing into your world a little bit, it's not unlike a financial advisor. That's the way I've kind of come to think of it is, and I've said this a billion times across a coffee table. When you, sir or madam, are wanting to invest in your personal future, I don't even know you very well, but you do one of two things when you're like thinking about retirement one day. You're either going to do tons of homework yourself, like tons, because you're going to know, how many more years am I working, and how much money do I think I'll be making, and what do I want retirement to look like, and what are my options, like what's within my 401k portfolio or whatever your thing is. So you're either going to do that homework yourself, and you're going to look at data and you're compare it, and you're going to say, okay, I think this is the best investment out of all the things I could do. You're either going to do that, or you're going to say, I don't know the first thing about the market. So you're going to hire somebody who knows what they're talking about, a financial advisor or whatever, and you're essentially going to do whatever they say. You're going to do one of those two things. And our argument has essentially been, if that's the strategy for investing in your personal future, why wouldn't you do precisely the same thing when you invested in the future of your community? Either do tons of homework, because it's all out there. It's a lot of work, but you can do it. Or to some extent, we've done that. So let us just talk you through the process. And if you trust everyone who's at this table saying, these are the greatest needs, join us, and essentially listen, and not listen to me, like listen to them, So it's a similar strategy.
And I think it's even more important there too, because it's not, in that sense, you're joining your community together and fighting one thing, whatever it may be, instead of everyone fighting for themselves, which, I mean, if you think of like just battle, like if every person was just fighting individually for themselves, it would be this chaotic event. I mean, it is already chaotic, but when everyone's fighting for their country or for the lives of their, not team, what am I thinking? Of the other soldiers. There we go.
Yes. Their unit.
Their unit. There's the word. There immediately is just so much more potential there because you're able to make a much bigger difference. You're able to really impact your community because you have all of the businesses that are involved in Get Comfortable together making that impact.
It is. It's in a sentence, it's a coordinated effort. And that's also one of our hunches is that most philanthropists aren't really talking. And understandably, they all have their thing. They all have whatever they're doing, and they're all just kind of in their own world doing it. And so what happens is unnecessary replication in some ways, and then unnecessary gaps as well. So yes, we're just trying to say, everyone, let's pull in the same direction. And, what we're going to hopefully see is some of those deep-seated, again, generational priorities, those things that have looked the same today as they did 30 years ago. That's what we want to go after. And another analogy, throwing analogies at you all over the place, any tall tree, like deep roots, if you want to chop down that tree, it's going to take lots of swings of the axe. And so now that we feel like, again, this collective model is like, okay, we have a pretty decently sharp, heavy axe. What's the tree we should be chopping down? And we got to go after that for a while. And hopefully then it falls and we say, all right, what's the next problem that we should be tackling? But it takes
a lot alignment. Of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And it takes a lot of people.
We'll kind of go in a little bit more on that, like philanthropic side of Creature Comforts. What is y'all's mission and y'all's vision and values, or I guess purpose, mission, and values? Yes.
Yeah, we use purpose instead of mission. We just think purpose is kind of your why, mission is kind of your what, values is kind of how we relate, how we get there. So that just seems simpler to our minds at least. But yes, the purpose from the get-go has been to foster human connection. Let me unpack that real quick. Speaking of like legacy, because we talk about legacy all the time, like who are the people coming up behind us and how do we set them up for success? Legacy also, I think, comprises looking upstream and saying, what have we been handed here? And what we love so much about our industry, which is essentially like the pub, the tavern, is that at least in its best case scenario, it's been the crossroads of humanity where everyone comes and life is exchanged and ideas are exchanged. And we love the legacy of the local brewery. And so to some extent, we realize when people come into our space, they have the opportunity, hopefully, to see people who look like them and people who don't look like them, but we're all here. And essentially, beer brings people together. Yeah. So that has been kind of that, why do we exist? Because we think people share life and ideas and hopefully disagree over a beer. I mean, heard it said a billion times, let's go get a beer. Yeah. And what that really means is let's go connect. Let's go talk. Right. So we love that as kind of our driving why, i.e. our purpose. And so out of that comes our mission statement, which is to be a force for good in the world through industry leading beverages and experiences, which is a lot of words. But what I love, and that was essentially recrafted as a company, about 3 months ago, so still somewhat new, is what we did is we elevated and we foregrounded that force for good language, which has, again, always been there, but now we want to like officially commit to it. So that's become, we want to be a force for good in the world. And that is a dynamic aspiration. It's always changing, but we always want to be constantly adjusting our sails to move in that direction. So, and I'll say this is kind of my interesting trivia, just because I find this so fascinating, but I'm also a history geek. Mm-hmm. So in 2009, an historian named Stephen Mansfield, New York Times best-selling author, he's written dozens of books. They all just crush. But he's a historian by trade, and he wrote a book called The Search for God in Guinness. And the subtitle is The Story of the Beer That Changed the World.
I feel like I've heard of this.
It's a fabulous read. If you're listening, you should go buy that book. In that book, if you read the preface, this is fascinating. He was not necessarily looking in the assembly of that manuscript to tell the story of Guinness. Mm-hmm. What he was really chasing down as a historian was, who was the first business who took seriously the call to serve through the company, and where that pursuit led him was to 18th century Dublin and to St. James Gate and to Guinness. And so corporate social responsibility, apparently, according to Mansfield, it was born in a brewery, which we think is irresistible. And so we're saying, good grief, we are a brewery too. And that's part of the mantle that we've been handed. And so we want to, continue that great tradition, which was, started at Guinness, so we just love that story as well. So anyway, back to purpose, that idea of not only bringing people together, but as a means to serve people, look around your community and say, what have we to offer you? That's been apparently part of this industry for a long time, and we just want to carry that torch as best we can.
So I was about to ask the same question I just asked. It's like, I feel like I've said
that all
already.
the
time. So how does the Get Comfortable campaign, and what is that like within the culture of Creature Comforts? Like how is your staff involved? How are the employees kind of engaged in those initiatives?
Yes, great question. So one of the things that we're like a tension we're trying to manage, a balance we're trying to strike, is essentially how impactful this program is, but also how meaningful it is. Because we want it to be effective. We want it to be serving the people we're trying to serve and moving the data we're trying to move. But we also want people to care. And that's a difficult balance to strike, especially when you have essentially 4 social services professionals on staff who, in the worst of times, we're just out on our satellite, out on our island, just kind of doing all the things we do. And people on the packaging line or in the tap room may have no idea. And so what we don't want to do is leave them in the dust of saying, hey, the company is doing all this cool work, whatever. So how do you do work that is impactful, but also make sure that it's meaningful and intuitive and understandable to everyone at the company? So to answer your question, one of the big pushes, when we moved into this direction of early literacy, one of the filters of many was, what can we invite people into at our company, but also in all these participating businesses company? We want to give money, but we also want to have opportunities for people to give their time and to give their life to this work. So, when we chose Stroud and we kind of pitched this whole new direction to the company, we said, we need not just the company's dollars, we need you, fellow creature, is what we call employees, to join us. And we need you during this pilot year because, there's about 70 kiddos that we're trying to match. But, hopefully in a couple of years, we're going to be in 3 schools. And the next year after that, we're going to have 6 schools. And hopefully we're going to be in the whole district. We're going to need a lot of people participating, intersecting with these kids. And again, what we were trying to do is lower the bar and saying, you don't have to be a teacher. You don't even have to be a parent. You don't have to see kids all the time.
You just have to know how to read.
You just have to know how to read, and you have to care, and they're going to set you up for success. And by the way, it's pretty fun. So that is a primary way that we are bringing creatures, again, our employees, in to Get Comfortable. But we also use our space downtown, our tap room there on Pulaski in Washington, as an opportunity to set up what we just call microservice projects for our customers, but also for our staff. And so that is an opportunity, every now and again to, on just, a random Wednesday or whatever, to have some of our funded agencies come into the brewery and set up, a table, and to create little micro service opportunities so that people can say, oh, okay, that's what I've heard about this thing, but now I've met the agency, and now I've kind of gotten the 411 on what this thing is. And hey, now I'll just produce a quick little deliverable that they're about to put into the hands of their clients. So even trying to connect the dots that way has been part and parcel with this program from the get-go. Because I think our starting position, if you will, is that everyone has something to offer. I think, having worked in this space for almost 15 years now, I think we are naturally discounting ourselves in that, well, I'm not a millionaire, so what can I do? Or I'm too young. I don't even know what I'm good at yet. Or I'm too old. I'm past my prime. Like, and I'm not saying people are trying to get off the hook. I think people just naturally say, I don't know if I have anything to offer. And we're the ones saying, no, yes, you do. Just take a step and like kind of pass through that gateway. And what we think is that person who was formerly, if you will, just a resident of Athens, somebody who just says, I live here, will become a citizen and will say, okay, I don't just live here. Like, this is my town. These are my people. These are my roots. Because really citizens behave in predictable and awesome ways. They take ownership of not only the lovely parts of their community, but the broken parts as well. And so we're just trying to give everyone we can think of at our company or people who just come across our products or walk into our tap room, how do we prompt them to take a step?
And so for people listening, like how do they get involved in the creature, like in the Get Comfortable? Like, how do they sign up to help with those programs? Yes,
great question. So right now we're kind of between on-ramps, if you will, because we're right in the middle of this pilot year. And thankfully, Books for Keeps did a spectacular job. They did the recruiting and they matched every one of these kids in need with a mentor.
Awesome.
So, right now the work is happening. And as I said, we're about to see how it worked and what next year looks like. But to answer your question, I would say generosity of many. That's in the mission to Get Comfortable. Not just businesses contribute to Get Comfortable. Private citizens, private foundations do like crazy. And so, if you go to creaturecomfortspear.com and look for Get Comfortable, you will find essentially an opportunity to give directly to the Get Comfortable Fund, which, for the sake of transparency, doesn't sit at Creature Comforts. That fund sits at the 501c3 that is the Athens Area Community Foundation. So even Creature is cutting our dollars over to the foundation.
Yeah.
But so people can give, and every dollar helps, but also people can take a step to serve. And the big next on-ramp is going to happen this coming summer as we prepare for next fall 2023. So
awesome.
Kind of track with us online, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc. You know how to find Creature, because there's going to be opportunities to actually get directly involved soon.
So we've talked about like creating remarkable experiences and being involved in the community. When you first heard the terms "make you remarkable," like when you got the email talking about coming on the podcast, what did that mean to you? What kind of impact did those words have?
Well, I've always loved that word, honestly. So it really popped just to me because I like to think in terms of what makes an experience remarkable, what makes a business remarkable. I'm just going to go super cliche and obvious here, but why is Chick-fil-A just a markedly different experience than some of their competition? And that's the case here in Georgia. It's the case wherever you go. It's like, wow, y'all have really honed in on something, and it is remarkable. So, one, I just love that word. And so there's this idea that again, is just part of our parlance and part of our learnings at Creature Comforts, which is known as the brand gap. Ever heard that term before? Apparently it's like a proper bold-faced business term, but that's not really my background, as we've covered. But anyway, the brand gap just, describes that space between who you as a company, in our case, want to be known for, and what are we actually known for? Who do we say we are? And if you asked our customers, who do they say we are? And chances are there's a gap there. And great organizations, remarkable organizations work to close that gap so that what we say about ourselves is what you say about us too. So when I think about remarkable, I think about not only companies or organizations that have clarity about what are we for?
Yeah.
And they know that. And people, if you were to like walk through their organization and you talk to anybody, they would say, this is what we're for. So you got to start there. But then doubly remarkable, businesses are also working to say, okay, this is what we say about ourselves. What does the world say about us? And they are working to make sure that those are, in fact, true statements. Because, people are going to fact check your solemn pledge, whether your solemn pledge is here's some good we're doing in the world or this is what we're all about. People are going to look at Google reviews and Yelp or whatever they're going to look at and try to verify that, because one, information is plentiful, but two, I think today's consumer, and there's tons of studies about this, they care more. Like there's this massive study done in 2017 about the millennial generation and like consumer behavior. And essentially what they said is that the millennial generation, which by the way is like the largest demographic in the workforce today, they will buy or boycott based on corporate values, which is amazing by the way.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot. Talk about things that we have in our hands that can influence the world. It's our purchasing decisions. And so anyway, that is all to say. We pay attention to that brand gap, and we are trying to make sure that is what we say about ourselves actually true out there. And if it's not, are we doing a poor job messaging, or are we not doing the work, and are we not who we said we are? And you got to walk that talk.
So how do you find out whether or not your consumer is seeing it, is missing the mark? Like they're not really picking up what you're putting down. How do you find out?
I mean, there's the kind of tactical ways you can do, and we do, customer reviews, scan the QR code, let us know how we did today, essentially. But also, I will say craft beer is such a, it's an active subculture. So there are many, 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 many websites out there in terms of how customers are ranking your products and are discussing your products. Untapped and Good Beer Hunting and yada, yada. There's like a lot of different ways that you can quantifiably say, what are people actually saying about us out there? So we pay a lot of attention to that, and we have some room to grow, to be sure, but customer reviews are something we're starting to like actually try to quantify and make and allow that to drive decision making. But additionally, as you know, it's kind of the unmeasurable part, which is just the anecdotal side.
Yeah.
We were just talking before we started recording here and getting to hear some of the team here at Oconee say, wow, Creature is so, interesting in this way or that way. I mean, I'm taking notes and I'm going to bring them back to my team saying, hey, here's just hopefully another indicator that we are who we say we are. So it's the anecdotal side. It's the qualitative side, if you will, is also, we're trying to pay more attention to the data that's out there, which is plentiful.
So what would you say for companies that don't have, it's incredible because you have such a large amount of, you have your reviews, but then you also have like those sources and the critics that are like, all right, this draft beer is better than this draft beer. You have all of those different sources. What would you say for someone who doesn't have that many sources of like input about their company? How can they really see if their company's really meeting what they're trying to be?
Great question. I mean, I think it would depend on the industry and if they're consumer facing versus like a business to business type of operation. I would say chances are because there can always be, so this is low hanging fruit. I would say chances are make sure before you start talking to like external stakeholders, make sure that your company is in alignment around whatever your lexicon is, but your purpose, mission, values. Are those just things we like to say, your values in particular, which is in our words, how you win, how you interact, how you behave. We like to say those can't just be off in a drawer somewhere or even painted on the wall somewhere. We like to say they should be tools in your hand and not just tablets on the wall. So if you say, if the senior leadership says we're all about this, this, and this, and our purpose statement is this, and you go to a line manager or somebody else in the organization and they cannot say back any of that to you, well, there's a problem there even internally. There's a brand gap internally if the people who work there don't say, oh, yes, we're all about this. So I would say probably, tend to your own backyard first and make sure there's strong alignment and clarity and meaningfulness behind whatever that organizational DNA is. That's what I would say.
And how does Creature create remarkable experiences? We talked about like the word remarkable, and I've seen like y'all's. I mean, like we've talked about, your social media is incredible. Your the events that y'all throw are great. I think even the farmers market. Are y'all still doing the farmers market?
I've been doing that since the get go. Yes.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like those are great, remarkable experiences. How do y'all think those up, and how do you keep them going?
Well, we do have a wonderful strategic location being right in the heart of downtown Athens. And as you alluded to, we reckon, like we always said, we don't even, back in 2014, 15, we don't even have like many dollars yet. We don't even have a lot of employees yet. We started very skeletal. But what we had from the get-go was like this space. And how do we even leverage this space as a tool? And yeah, again, you already said it. The Athens Farmers Market at the time was renting out space essentially down the street for their midweek market. And we were able to just reach out to their leadership and say, hey, we have like an empty parking lot. Y'all probably don't want to be paying for it. Y'all can just come here for free. And heck, we even built out a deal that, when, customers come in and buy beers on market days, we give them tokens to go, we pay for tokens for them to go and spend it on local growers and makers. So anyway, that was just a really easy, fruitful thing as a result of our location. But no, I mean, I would say when I think back over my years at Creature, the moments that really stick out as remarkable is hopefully when people are saying, gosh, a brewery is involved in this, whether it's like the support of the local creative economy, or it's support of our local farmers market, or it's what we're doing through Brew for One or Get Comfortable or whatever. Our CEO says this all the time. He hopes that the more people dig in to us, like the more they learn about us, hopefully like the better we get.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of Remarkable, is that almost surprising element of a brewery, a bank cares about this. Like what? So, when I get in front of rooms to talk about Get Comfortable, I feel like I'm always saying, okay, let me connect, before we go into details, let me connect a brewery to literacy really quickly. And there's always kind of a chuckle in the room because it's like, that's true. What? That's bizarre. But we like kind of that surprise of like, yeah, a brewery's involved in this. So I think that's, for us, so much of our Remarkable approach to our presence or our brand identity or whatever you want to call it, our customer engagement, is really hopefully catching people off guard of like, wow, that I've been to a lot of breweries, but I've never, seen the, I can't think of the title of that group, but the aerial, what's the aerial performance group in town? Canopy.
Oh yeah.
I've never walked into, a brewery and there's literally people hanging from the rafters. Oh yeah. We've hosted like Canopy showcases, and that's remarkable to us.
That's so cool.
It's so amazing. I'll show you pictures.
Oh, you got to show me pictures. That's crazy. Well, talking about remarkable experiences that you've kind of witnessed, y'all were in a Marvel movie, right? Like, yes. This has been on my iPad. I've been excited to be bringing this up. Tell me the story of how that happened.
How much time do we have? It's a stranger than fiction story. Okay, I'll be brief. The year is 2017.
It's a Marvel movie, so I mean,
yes, that's true. So the Russo brothers, Joe Russo being, perhaps the more visible of that directorial producing team out of Hollywood, they shot a number of the Marvel movies, but in particular, Infinity War and Endgame, those two films, it was like a seamless production run shot in the studios south of Atlanta. So that is to say, they were in Atlanta for years shooting those two films back to back.
Yeah.
During that same time, again, Creature is a smaller, craft brewery on the scene. And in 2017 in particular, and you can Google this, was like the trop shortages of Atlanta, the Tropicalia shortage. Yeah. So that's our flagship IPA. That is still to this day, the majority of our business. That is, in terms of beer, that is what we're known for. And so there was just a lot more demand back in the day than there was supply. And people have asked me many times before, was that like a strategy? Was there like a scarcity effect you were going after? And I'm like, no, we were brewing around the clock. We were squeezing every drop of beer out of that downtown facility at the time.
I like where your head's at, but no.
Yeah, I wish we were that good or that strategic, but no, we were just making as much as we can make, and we were heaving it into the market, and there was just a lot of pent up demand. And so, I mean, again, Google it. During 2017 in particular, people were like leaving their job or like turning around in Atlanta to go chase the truck with the Tropicalia logo to like go to the package store so they can secure like 1 6-pack, because that's all the allotment was. It was a crazy time because that beer was just really catching fire.
And is that just y'all's company? Is that just Creature Comforts? Or?
That's just one of our brands.
Even that remarkable. Just someone chasing after a truck just to get.
It was bizarre. And again, it sounds like I'm making this up, but I mean, check Reddit, whatever. It was a thing back in the day. Thankfully, now we can produce plenty to satisfy, but at the time we could not. And so anyway, meanwhile, Joe Russo is shooting all those Marvel films, and he's kind of a craft beer guy, and he has all his PA, his production assistants, like trading shifts, so they can go trace down from Tropicalia. And he's like, "What in the world, y'all? Like, somebody bring me this magical beer." And so eventually he tried it. I'm super paraphrasing. He eventually tried the beer, said, "Wow, that's pretty good." Where's Athens? Oh, that's actually kind of close. And somewhat, came incognito up to the brewery. And had more of the product and said, wow, this, the beer's incredible. But then, here's really the point, business owner, he started to really, like Chris was saying, he started to dig a little deeper, and he was starting to see evidence of our admission of like, yes, what we do is brew and sell beer, but why we exist is this other thing. And, he just took a very sincere interest in the brand. And became friends with some of the founders at the time, kind of eventually like reached out and said, "Hey, I've been checking y'all out. I would love to meet at some point, hear kind of your vision for the place," which again, for local business leaders was like, what?
Yeah.
So he just became a friend of the brewery over those years, again, that they were in production down there. And eventually he said, "Hey, in this film Endgame, I can't tell you any details at all." I mean, they locked down, understandably, that content.
Interviews of the actors just like, I'm so scared that someone's going to yell at me.
Can't talk about. And nor could he. But he said, we have kind of a narrative need for like a beer.
I can't tell you why, but we need a beer.
We need a beer. And he said, basically, we could like farm it out and have somebody pay us a lot of money to do product placement. We don't really want to do that. We could come up with a fictional brand. We don't really want to do that. We would love to, throw some love at a local Georgia-based brewery that we really admire. How about it? And of course, our sales team and our leader,
foaming at the mouth.
They're like, "What do you need, sir?"
We will give you the keys to the store.
Yes, that's it. It was the craziest offer because at the time, I think it's already been eclipsed, but at the time, Endgame was the biggest box office release of all time, like cinema history. So
I think it either still is or it's like close second.
I mean, $1 billion in opening weekend, like just mind-blowing numbers at terms of that movie. And they're in the movie, and with Thor kind of down on his luck in the narrative space, he didn't get Thanos in the previous film, so he's kind of bummed, and he's kind of having, a beer from time to time, and like straight up, you like watch Thor just sitting there with like a perfectly turned to camera, Creature Comforts, Tropicalia, and there's this other great walking scene. And I mean, like you kind of can't miss it. And there's also an Athena can and a couple can. So like,
really?
Yeah. That one's more Easter eggy. You have to know what you're looking for, but the Tropicalia can you couldn't miss. And so, he threw us a sizable bone in that. And again, the craft beer geeky world was like, why is this little brewery in Athens, Georgia getting that sort of placement and like the biggest film of all time? It was just, again, you can't make this stuff up.
I remember seeing that in theaters and being like, no, I read that wrong. That's not Creature Comforts. Like, I know Creature Comforts. And they're like, yeah. And then I started hearing, like, this is the funniest part. I heard rumors around Athens of how y'all got in the movie. It was so great because I remember someone being like, yeah, Chris Hemsworth just loved Creature Comforts, and so he got it in the movie. But hearing your story, like hearing how it actually happened, is so much cooler because everything we've been talking about today. What a great way to end on this, by the way, too. Joe Russo, like he saw y'all's company, he saw the mission and the vision after kind of looking into you guys. It's also freaking me out that he came to Athens to see Creature Comforts. It's like, I don't even really know much about this guy, but he did all the Marvel movies. And yes, I'm a huge Marvel nerd. I love the movies.
Yes.
Like cinematography, everything is on point.
It's incredible.
Absolutely beautiful. Storytelling, beautiful. But the fact that like he came and he saw Creature Comforts and was like, whoa, like y'all aren't just a small brewery. Like you have a really prominent mission, vision, and purpose, mission, purpose, values. Yeah. Boom. I got it. I will get it by the end of this, which is really soon. But it's really fascinating to even see that like, that's kind of all that we've talked about. And he kind of, y'all are in a similar position as he is, or he was when he came to you guys. Like he's this bigger guy who's like, all right, well, I can give you this opportunity. Mm-hmm. And now you guys get to do the same thing with these other companies with Get Comfortable.
Right.
Where you're like, I mean, God's really blessed us. We have an insane amount of finances. Let's get together and let's work and let's do this. Let's throw someone a bone. It's a really cool thing.
It's mind blowing. I'll give you one last little anecdote that was just so charming and just one of those great days at work where, it's opening weekend. We as a company have heard murmurs of like, we sent them down a bunch of stuff, in terms of beer and.
Oh yeah. Did y'all even know?
We had no idea. We're like, we might have made it, but it might have just ended up on the cutting room floor.
Like y'all had heard rumors that it was going to be in there, but you weren't even positive. Oh.
And this was like years later, mind you. I mean, again,
Oh man.
They finished wrapping and then it's another year of post or whatever, all the incredible graphics and all the things they do. So, to some extent, people had kind of forgotten about it.
Uh-huh.
And then until it was like, oh, here comes the big movie. And so we just hoped and prayed essentially. So we rented out a theater at Beechwood. We rented out the entire theater for our staff and we shut down production for the day and we had everyone come out and, we got up in front of the room before the credits rolled and said, we hope there's something to see. If anybody sees a creature or something, shout, and then, the movie played. And by the way, we all had Tropicalia in hand because you can get one there. And so, yes, when the first huge unmissable shot of Thor walking down, cracking a trop, we lost our pretty little minds. It was the best possible experience.
You can't hear anything. Everyone's like, that's it. That's it. Yes.
It was pretty memorable.
So are they still in contact with Joe Russo? Are we going to see more Tropicalia? Are we going to see the new superhero Tropicalia anytime soon?
That would be better. We are still very much in contact with them. And in fact, they have been extremely helpful in opening some of the doors for us to plant a location out in LA County, which is hopefully by the time you're listening to this, it has opened. At this point in time, it's literally weeks away. Of opening not just a tap room, but a full, a West Coast production facility, and Joe Russo and his brother and his team at Agbo, which is his production company, really were instrumental in helping us make that really cool strategic leap to the West Coast. So they have been better than friends. They have been mentors and champions and advocates. So again, you can't make this stuff up. But what I love, and again, back to really the ethos of this podcast is, it just started with us being ourselves and hopefully staying ourselves as we grow and knowing what we're for and hopefully being what we want to be for. And, somebody took notice and was profoundly generous and kind to us.
And kind of along those lines, what are some advice that you would give to anyone listening to this, whether it be in the business world or even just someone who's looking to be a better leader and really lead their company kind of as y'all have led Creature Comforts? What advice would you give?
I mean, super pragmatic. There are a lot of phenomenal books out there. Galore in terms of companies who take this stuff seriously. I can give you a whole bibliography, but if you're not really a reader, I would say if you haven't yet, business leader, take the time to figure out what is our purpose. Yes, we generate profit and we produce X and Y services and products, but why do you do that?
Yeah.
You should know that. You probably do, but if you don't, you should know that. And you should be doing everything you can think of as a leader to drive that through the culture of the company. And I would say secondarily on the community side of things, I would say just my personal bothersome opinion. I think everyone should have a plan to support the city they love. And if, one does not particularly love Athens, I would say that's fine. Go find that place that you love and then dig in there. Go find that place where, again, you're not just a resident anymore. You're a citizen. You're taking ownership of the brilliant and the broken pieces of your community because, back to what I've already said, everyone has something to offer. And sometimes it's just a prompt or you can do it, but everyone has some time, maybe some dollars, some skill, some opportunity, some influence that they can leverage in support of their community. And develop a plan around that. Take 10 minutes in a row to think about what do I have that this place needs, and find somebody who can help you take a step.
Yeah, Those are great. I'm just like was in a trance. I was like, wow, that's really impactful. I mean, really just being involved in your community is such an important thing, especially for someone who's like, you've come from a place of starting as a really small company and growing. Like, not only is it a great way for you to grow, but it's a great way for you to really show your community you're there for them and you care for them. And really just kind of going forward, and we've talked a lot about getting involved with the Get Comfortable campaign, but how can someone who's listening kind of get more involved with Creature Comforts? And maybe it's helping out with the Get Comfortable campaign or all the other different philanthropic endeavors y'all do. How can they get involved? And if someone wants to help, I know with what was it called? The Books for
Keeps.
Books for Keeps. How does someone become not a teacher, but someone who helps with
like a literacy mentor?
Yeah, a literacy mentor.
Yes. I mean, I would say for sure, Google Books for Keeps. You'll find them easily outside of the work they're doing in tandem with us on Get Comfortable. They are doing remarkable work throughout throughout the community throughout the year, and they need lots of volunteers to drive what they do. Click on the website, you will find a button that says how to volunteer. They could use your time and resources for sure. In terms of Get Comfortable, I would say, track with us on social media, basically at Creature Comforts Beer, whatever the platform is, it's basically all the same. You'll find us, and we will be, again, laying out some action steps when the time comes. Right now, if anything, a great problem to have, we have a lot of folks who are saying, we've heard about this, how do we get involved, especially from the corporate level, and we're saying, hold that thought. Let's see if this is working first, and we will know that shortly. And then when we're ready to scale, we're going to need a lot more resources. So I would say track with us online, because we're going to be on-ramping an additional cohort of volunteers as we move into the latter half of the summer and as we prepare for the next school year and, the next round of our pilot work. So I would say, the easy piece, track with us, creaturecomfortsbeer.com, social media. Books for Keeps is really, again, our primary nonprofit partner in this work. Throw your weight behind them by all means. And, I'll just say it, drink Creature beer. I would honestly, if you're a beer drinker and if you're old enough, I would say we do wonderful things with your dollars, and we take that very, very seriously. So hopefully it's not just a beer anymore. It's something better than that. That's at least what we want to be known for.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, seriously, just the amount of insight that you have and wisdom in the business industry is crazy. And it's been really cool to hear the story of Creature as they've grown and even featured in a Marvel movie. It's just so cool. So thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely. And let me just throw that back at you real quick. How remarkable is it that a local bank does this? I mean, talk about like pleasant, inspiring surprise. This is incredible that y'all take the time to amplify stories like this. That's deeply humbling and really, really cool. So y'all keep doing your thing.
Hey, we're making our mark one podcast at a time. Thank you. But seriously, I mean, we have that like posted on one of our like branded elements, and I think it's the funniest. I think it's a great line, but it's fun to say.
Fantastic. Heck yeah. Well, it's the perfect punctuation mark.
I love it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and like us on social media or follow us on social media at Oconee State Bank for more information.